Welcome to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, and we're here to bring you the biggest stories from Israel and the Middle East. It is 2 p.m. in Israel and 7 a.m. in New York City. I'm Caleb Ben David, and today is day 664 of the war in Gaza. Let's get into all the top headlines at this hour. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff touched down in Israel earlier today and is set to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu this afternoon. Witkoff will try to unravel the stalled hostage for ceasefire talks and will also tackle the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Now, this is his first visit to Israel by Witkoff in almost 3 months and comes after he and Secretary of State Marco Rubio met earlier this week in Miami and Washington with Israeli officials, including the Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer. Witkoff is also expected to discuss broader policy with Netanyahu on how to break the logjam in negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage deal. Now, Hamas rejected the latest U.S. mediated proposal and reportedly won't even re-enter talks unless the humanitarian situation in Gaza improves. Witkoff said last week that if the U.S. determines that Hamas is not negotiating in good faith, it will explore with Israel, quote, other options for freeing the remaining 50 hostages held in Gaza. But for more, let's go to our reporter Shosh Bedrosian in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square.
Kalev, this is a pretty significant trip for U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. He landed earlier in the afternoon here in Israel. He took off from Miami last night, and his first stop here is to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Remember, Steve Witkoff has been instrumental in trying to secure deals between Israel and Hamas, ceasefire and hostage deals. The families of hostages see him as a beacon of light, as he has helped so many of these hostages get a second chance on life after they were released from Hamas captivity. He's been a key mediator in these negotiations in Doha, Qatar. So this is not only a significant trip, it comes on the heels of failed and stalled talks in Doha just last week after Hamas responded to the proposal that was on the table, not only with a hardened response, Kalev, but with more demands in terms of wanting more prisoners to be released in exchange for the hostages that Hamas is still holding on to at this point in time. Witkoff actually was supposed to go to Doha if a deal ironed out, but unfortunately he stayed in Europe and met with officials there and returned back to the United States after these deals did fail. But here inside of Israel, he is also going to be focusing on the humanitarian crisis that's being reported coming out of the Gaza Strip at this point in time. We are hearing and seeing these horrific images of children starving, hungry as well. So it's something that he will be addressing. We know that President Trump just said the other day he's wanting to bring in food centers, a place where Palestinians and people in Gaza can just walk into without having any fences or boundaries or anything like that. But Ynet is reporting this will be his second visit to the Gaza Strip since January, where he will be seeing the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the Israeli and American-backed organization that has been working to get aid in to Palestinians and Gazans who need this very, very critical and important aid. It has been the center of controversy in the media because there have been reported incidents of gunfire from the IDF, although the IDF has not confirmed many of these incidents that were reported and blames, the GHF actually blames Hamas for trying to make Palestinians not want to go there, causing violence and danger at these humanitarian sites. But he will be going there to Gaza, which is a very significant development, of course, Kalev, as he works to push this deal forward. We also know new information being reported from Axios at this point in time that Israel actually responded to Hamas's response last week to the ceasefire and hostage deal, providing them with a document with key points to their response. So all of this is continuing to come out, and we are going to follow all of the developments as Steve Witkoff is officially here in Israel, meeting with officials, but also working to see the situation inside of Gaza as these negotiations clearly are still happening on the back burner. Kalev?
All right, Shosh, thank you for that. Shosh Bedrosian at Hostage Square. Now, speaking of those other options for Gaza, Prime Minister Netanyahu has reportedly sent a message to Hamas warning that if it does not accept the ceasefire proposal on the table in the coming days, Israel may start to annex territory from Gaza along its border with Israel. Now, according to reports in Israeli media, Netanyahu raised the idea during a meeting with top aides to discuss the Gaza war amid attempts to make some progress towards a hostage release and ceasefire deal. In its latest proposal for a deal, Israel provided a document with its red lines regarding IDF troop withdrawals from parts of Gaza. The proposal reportedly has Israel holding on to the Philadelphia corridor along the Egyptian border and rules out for now a reopening of the Rafah crossing. It also detailed the names and numbers of Palestinian security prisoners Israel is prepared to release if a deal is reached. And in connection with Gaza annexation, hundreds of right-wing activists last night marched from Sderot to the Gaza border, demanding the government reestablish Israeli settlements in parts of the Strip. Now, among those marching was Likud Communications Minister Shlomo Karhi, who was one of the 6 ministers that yesterday requested Defense Minister Israel Katz give permission for a scouting mission inside Gaza to find sites for new Israeli communities there. Israel withdrew all its settlements from Gaza and some 9,000 residents living in them as part of the 205 disengagement operation. Well, joining us now for more is Dan Diker. He is president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Affairs. Dan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Kalev.
Dan, thank you for joining us. First of all, I just want to get your response regarding Steve Witkoff's visit. Let's try to break it down a bit. His main goal seems to be to try to reignite the hostage talks. Is there, given the latest demands that Hamas is making, is there room there to restart the talks and possibly reach a deal, at least a 60-day deal?
I'm sorry, I didn't. Can you ask me again? I didn't hear you properly, Kalev.
Sure. I'm asking about is there room for Steve Witkoff to find some space to actually restart these hostage talks and reach this 60-day hostage deal?
Kalev, we've been playing this game now for nearly 2 years with Hamas, and it almost is embarrassing the degree to which we've learned clearly that doing business with Hamas is doing business with Al Qaeda or ISIS. You know, it's really a game of no return. Israel is now trying to apply maximum pressure by by insisting that it might annex or apply Israeli law to parts of Gaza. The way we've heard Israeli officials say the same thing about Judea and Samaria, if in fact Britain and France were to declare support for a Palestinian state. We are obviously opposite an Iranian proxy that has an interest of dragging out negotiations for years and years and years. You know, we've been in this conversation, you and I, for nearly 2 years. So Israel is changing direction. I just returned from Washington and can tell you that Israel has the complete and total support of the United States in order to prosecute a major offensive and try to and change the dynamic between us and these Hamas terror operatives. And I think that a major pressure campaign, a new frontal assault is what I think we're going to be seeing. Witkoff understands exactly that what is happening on the humanitarian situation on the ground. This is a major political warfare campaign, and it's quite extraordinary that we only see children apparently starving. There is no starvation in Gaza. There are no starving adults in Gaza. This is one big integrated war by Israel's formidable enemy, and I think that we will see a major shift in strategy now by Israel opposite Hamas.
But let me ask you, Dan, are the U.S. and Israel on the same page when it comes to that humanitarian situation? As you mentioned earlier, because earlier this week we heard President Trump say that there was suffering and starvation in Gaza and something needs to be done. Now, obviously, this is one of the reasons why Witkoff is going to Gaza himself to clarify it. But right now, are the U.S. and Israel on the same page there?
Kalev, it is clear that Israel and the U.S. are on the same page. We've heard, notwithstanding the statement that President Trump made that there appears to be starvation, President Trump himself was not in the Gaza Strip. He was not in Israel meeting with Israeli officials. He has obviously been deeply affected by false and fraudulent reports by the New York Times and other networks. By the way, we know that the New York Times retracted that horrific a picture that appeared on the front page of the New York Times of a young child by the name of Al-Matuki, who we know now suffered from multiple and incurable diseases, which is why the child appeared. But that poster child now for the fraudulent accusation of starvation has now been retracted, as well as the BBC and others that took that photograph. And we know from the GHF that Reverend Johnny Moore, who's running the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, who was appointed by President Trump, has said repeatedly that Hamas is stealing and preventing aid from reaching places that it should reach. And it's causing havoc. We know there's a political war that's being prosecuted. When I say political war, I mean a media war by reporters on the ground that are from the Turkish regime as well as from Qatar. It's much more complex than meets the eye, and it may be that ILTV may be one of the only honest, sincere networks left in the Western world, unfortunately.
I appreciate that compliment, Dan. But as you're saying, if some of this messaging is influencing President Trump, then is there something more Israel should be doing to get its message out and to try to clear a picture of what is happening there in the Gaza Strip?
Well, that's a key question, Khaled, and the answer is absolutely yes. Israel would be well served to have teams of media relations people on the ground, bringing them and exposing the enemy's strategy and tactics 24/7. I do know that the Prime Minister's office has a 3 times weekly at least press conference, but it's clear here, we've never seen this before in modern political history, where media and social networks have really determined conclusions about Israel, meaning these false accusations of genocide and war crimes and starvation, when in fact it's quite easy to prove. We can bring 10, 15 videos right now to prove Hamas's malign behavior, but absolutely Israel should be on the ground exposing this malign behavior and these false reports minute after minute after minute. We're not seeing teams of Israeli media experts on the ground all the time exposing this other kind of eighth front warfare against Israel. So yes, there's a lot to do right now.
Right. Now, among the other issues, Witkoff is expected to be speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu is, of course, the Iran issue, which is far from resolved. A lot of questions going forward about whether Israel and potentially the U.S. need to take further military action or need to find some way to increase pressure on Iran not to start reestablishing its nuclear program. Again, what are the options that Witkoff and Netanyahu could be discussing going forward on that issue?
That is the key and most complex issue of everything that we've discussed. And in fact, as we've said before, Israel knows that the 12-day war basically generated between 2 and 4 years of respite from Iran's existential capabilities to threaten Israel and, by the way, the United States. And there are a number of options that I know are being worked on at present. We are far from seeing the end of the war against the Islamic Republic. And clearly that's, I'm not sure that Witkoff and Netanyahu are going to discuss Iran right now because of the extraordinary urgency of the Gaza situation. But clearly the two sides are meeting. We know that that was only round one against the Iranian regime. They still maintain hundreds of ballistic missiles. They maintain 450 kilograms at least of nearly military grade uranium, and they maintain international terror capability that also has to be taken care of. So that was only round one in this very I would almost call it strategic or existential war continuing against the Islamic Republic.
All right, Dan Diker from the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Jan, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you, Kalev. Shabbat shalom.
Now, Dan mentioned it, that Canada has become the latest Western democracy to announce it has plans to officially recognize a Palestinian state. This after French President Emmanuel Macron's similar declaration last week and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's this week. Now, like France and Britain, Canada says it will recognize the Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the Canadian recognition would be predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including holding elections and committing to a demilitarized state. Now, Canada had long stated that it would only recognize a Palestinian state at the conclusion of peace talks with Israel. Carney said that the realities on the ground, including the mounting hunger crisis in Gaza, have damaged prospects for negotiated peace. Carney also saying that the Israeli Knesset vote calling for the annexation of the West Bank contributed to the decision.
For the reasons I cited earlier, Canada intends to recognize the state of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state. Canada will increase its efforts in supporting strong democratic governance in Palestine and the contributions of its people to a more peaceful and hopeful future. I spoke today with President Abbas at length to reaffirm his commitments. Canada reiterates that Hamas must immediately release all hostages taken in the horrific terrorist attack of October 7th, that Hamas must disarm, and that Hamas must play no role in the future governance of Palestine.
Now, Canada's announcement drew a sharp response from President Trump, who posted on his social media, "Wow, Canada has just announced that it is backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them." Now, Canada is the U.S.'s second largest trading partner and is in the middle of trade talks with the Trump administration. Well, joining us now for more is Vivian Bercovici, the former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Madam Ambassador Vivian, thanks for joining us. Before we start the analysis, I just want to get your visceral reaction to this announcement by Canada.
You sure about that?
I think if you could keep it clean, yes.
Look, my visceral reaction, honestly, is rage, but I'm not at all surprised. I mean, we could see this coming. We could see it coming with Prime Minister Carney's predecessor, Justin Trudeau. And now that Carney is the leader of the country, he's making good on what I can assure you have been the strong intentions of the federal bureaucracy in Ottawa for many years, and certainly the Liberal Party.
I want to ask you, as I mentioned, President Trump making his statement that this could complicate trade talks between the U.S. and Canada. As I mentioned, Canada, second largest trading partner with the U.S. Would that have any impact at all on this move by the Canadian government?
Hard to say. Prime Minister Carney was elected on the promise that he was this great statesman, very sage, well-networked, understood power and the levers of power. And he was the guy to work with and, frankly, take on Trump. I mean, he made comments to that effect throughout the campaign in March and April. Since he was elected on April 28th, he's been weak. He's been absent. And I think that his latest gesture or announcement with respect to the state of Palestine has not been well received by President Trump, clearly, but it's just the latest in many, many missteps on Prime Minister Carney's part. I want to comment, too, in that sort of news bit that you dropped right at the beginning, where we heard that Prime Minister Carney had a lengthy discussion with Abu Mazen, President Abbas, on the telephone yesterday. I can tell you that Prime Minister Carney has not spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu since he was elected. They've had very public spats. There has been no direct contact between the prime ministers of Israel and Canada. And yet here Carney is falling over himself to speak with Abbas. Abbas has had the opportunity to meet the conditions that King Carney, sets out in his statement. Abbas has had the opportunity to do that for what, 20 years? I've lost track of how many years ago he was elected on a 4-year mandate. So this performative stuff, got to keep it clean. It's very aggravating.
Yeah, referring back to something our previous guest did, and he referred to the sort of public campaign, disinformation, incitement against Israel, blaming it solely for the situation in Gaza. I wonder the impact of that in a country like Canada or among Canadians. And whether this move is a reflection of that. How would we receive? What are you hearing back from fellow Canadians, and you're speaking with them?
Sure, and I'm in very close contact all the time, both with political echelons and also people in the media, as well as the community in Toronto. And the Canadian community is the 4th largest in the world. Many people don't realize that, after Israel, America, France. So it's close to 400,000 Jews. Look, none of it surprises me at all. As challenging as misinformation and outright lies, why don't we call them what they are, in the American media, in European media, as much as this influences public opinion in those places, the access to information in Canada is far more limited than I think the Western world realizes. Most of the media in Canada receives significant funding from the federal government. This was an innovation of Prime Minister Trudeau's. The major broadcaster in the country, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the equivalent of the BBC in the UK, is fully funded by the federal government. Well, with money comes influence, whether it's overt or kind of, soft influence. If you relied upon mainstream media in Canada for information about the Middle East, I would say that you would be receiving the kind of information we expect from Al Jazeera. It's bad. It's bad. So people don't even know. They don't even have, and the Canadian government has also taken to blocking certain information in its internet spats with Meta and other, giants in the tech industry.
Moving beyond Canada now to the broader picture, this is part of a trend. Vivian, we saw, as we mentioned, with the UK and France. Now there's talk of Australia, even Germany, whose foreign minister is in Israel today, perhaps joining it. What is the overall impact? Obviously, it's not changing the situation on the ground in Israel, but what is really these kind of declarations? How can we assess what the impact of these moves are?
So again, I think it's very performative, and they're all going to go to the UN in September. and continue with this this exercise. But the real impact, again, I think, is public opinion. I mean, Israel is becoming more and more isolated by the moment. I think that there's tremendous frustration, and frankly, I think it's understandable to a degree, with the current Israeli government and the manner in which it has chosen to communicate, not communicate, and conduct this war, particularly during the last year. So, you know, there's frustration because very often it seems that there's no one to speak to in Israel. There's no address to turn to. And I think that this very coordinated effort, which has been underway for a long time, this is not new, but this is an opportunity. Just like Yahya Sinwar waited for his opportunity to attack Israel, I think many Western liberal democracies and the bureaucracies that support them have waited for this opportunity. As they see it, it's now presented, and they're going to take it.
Right. I want to just pick up on your point. How should Israel be reacting to these? Obviously, we're going to see the sort of pro forma calling in the ambassador for a discussion. Your successor calling in your successor for a discussion, and there'll be reactions. But how should Israel be responding to this situation, which is going to reach its kind of climax, as you mentioned, at the UN General Assembly in September?
I think that Israel should first get its house in order, start controlling what I think are extremist ministers and other members of the coalition government, which have been given a lot of room to make a lot of problematic statements and conduct. I believe it's today or tomorrow, there's a group of 22 MKs from Otzma Yehudit and the Religious Zionist Party that are going into the Gaza Strip to scout appropriate land and locations for settlements in the Gaza Strip.
That was requested. I don't know if it was approved, but yes, I mentioned that.
They are very clear, but the point is they're super clear about their intention to annex, to occupy, and to settle. And those are very unhelpful actions and comments in the midst of what is probably the worst crisis the state of Israel has faced since 1948. And it behooves the government and Prime Minister Netanyahu to take control of these elements, these participants in the coalition government, and exercise some discipline and demonstrate to the world and to Israelis that there is a guiding principle, there's a vision, and there's an end game. And nobody knows what those things are. Mm-hmm. None of that has been communicated. And I think that he has been given a lot of room for maneuver. Right. And the frustration level, domestically and internationally, is just off the charts.
All right. Vivian Bercovici, the former Canadian ambassador to Israel, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thanks for having me.
Certainly related story, the U.S. by Bernie Sanders to block the sale of nearly $700 million worth of American arms to Israel. The motion was defeated by a wide margin of 70 to 27, but showed a growing number of Democrats opposed to the arms sale. A similar motion last year gained only 18 votes from the Democrats. This was the message from Sanders on the Senate floor in the debate leading up to the vote.
France and Canada have said that they will recognize a Palestinian state. The United Kingdom has said it will do so as well if Israel does not immediately end this war and surge humanitarian aid. And at the UN last month, 149 countries voted for a ceasefire resolution condemning the use of starvation as a weapon of war and demanding an end to Israel's blockade on humanitarian aid. Mr. President, the American people are haunted by the images coming out of Gaza, and these are some of those images.
And you see Senator Sanders showing some of the very images that one of the child, as we mentioned, has been discredited by Israeli authorities. Well, that is a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. We are here every hour on the Hour with the latest breaking developments, in-depth reports, and exclusive insights into the stories shaping the region and the world. We'll continue to bring you real-time updates, analysis, and voices on the ground. Stay with us for the next edition of ILTV. I'm Caleb Ben David.